Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today we're going to dive back into my complete run of Bronze Age Wonder Woman comics. So, last time around, I presented the first 50 Bronze Age issues of Wonder Woman, beginning with the new look reboot in 178 and running up through 227. And that was actually worked out to be perfect. Not just, the 50 issue thing sounds arbitrary, but actually it was perfect because that ended right before yet another reboot. Now, if you'll remember the first video, I'm going to have a link to it here in case you haven't seen it. Wonder Woman was just a total mess during this period here, and they kept rebooting it over and over and over again, relaunching it, changing direction, having a whole new backstory and like this and that. And so that's going to continue in this next 50 issues. We're going to see no fewer than 3 soft reboots plus a couple other total direction changes as well that aren't quite big enough to really constitute a reboot. But just to refresh your memory again, last time the series rebooted the 178 with the new look. It then rebooted again with 204, where they dumped all the new look stuff and they brought back her original costume and her original powers. And then they just made it into basically like a kids reprint series where they were just rehashing these silly stories from the 50s. They quickly rebooted things again with 212, where they launched the 12 Labors of Wonder Woman thing, where she was trying to prove herself to the Justice League that she was worthy of rejoining the Justice League. That ran for a long time because the book wasn't monthly at that point. And they finally finished that storyline just in time for another reboot that we'll be getting into here. So again, we had the reboot in 178, we had a reboot in 204, we had a reboot in 212, and we're going to get yet another reboot. I'm just going to jump right into it here. Another reboot here in issue 228. So what you'll see, we have 2 Wonder Women fighting each other, and then there's a Nazi guy in the background. So what happens in this issue is that Wonder Woman is just doing her thing, and when this airplane shows up, and she follows the airplane back, and it's actually from Earth 2. But not only is it from Earth 2, it's actually time traveled from World War II on Earth 2. Right, so it's traveled through both to another dimension, but also forward in time. So she travels backwards in time, where she meets the Earth 1 Wonder Woman, who is the main character of the series, meets the Earth 2 Wonder Woman, and they've met before, but this time around, because it's happening in World War II, it's happening before the first time they met. This sounds like something out of X-Men, and so of course they fight each other because the Earth 2 Wonder Woman thinks that she's like a Nazi spy. They ended up teaming up briefly, because the weird thing that happens is the Earth 1 Wonder Woman gets sent back to Earth 1 before they actually finish the case that they're on, and the series from this point just follows the Earth 2 Wonder Woman. So basically we switch from Earth 1 to Earth 2 during World War II, and so when the Earth 1 Wonder Woman goes back, we don't know what happens to her, except she is appearing in the pages of Justice League at this point. But yeah, so this issue, all of a sudden, we're on Earth 2 during World War II. Why did they do something like this? Well, it's because the Wonder Woman TV show had just come out, and the first season of the TV show was set in World War II. And so they wanted the comic Wonder Woman to match the TV show Wonder Woman. But of course, anyone who's watched the TV show knows that that didn't last, and they eventually just changed it so she was in the present. And so, yeah, you guessed it, after a few issues, this is going to reboot again, where we dump everything from Earth 2 and we go back to Earth 1. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, we have this brief run here where the book has gone monthly at this point. I think sales might have picked up, or it might have just been hoping that sales would pick up because of the TV show bump. But starting in this issue, all of a sudden, we're not following the Wonder Woman that we've been following for the past 100-some issues or more. We're actually following the adventures of Earth 2 Wonder Woman during World War II. And we start off with another bondage cover, because, of course, Wonder Woman loves the bondage covers. And so we get this here. And the other thing I want to mention now, you'll remember from the last video, the craziness going on with Steve Trevor. So Steve Trevor, Wonder Woman's boyfriend, had been around, right from the beginning of the series, and he was just abruptly killed off in issue 180, and he died. He's dead. Now, he was brought back around issue 225 through this convoluted thing where Aphrodite basically took like his memories and like created a simulacrum or something, and basically had him reborn. And that lasted for like 3 issues, but then all of a sudden we switched to Earth 2. So this new Steve Trevor that was introduced, we never really get anything with that character. So that was completely pointless. But we now have another different Steve Trevor, because since we're on Earth 2, we have the Earth 2 Steve Trevor during World War II. So I hope you're following on this, because it's about to, over the course of these issues, it's going to get even more confusing. So every time they do a reboot, the Steve Trevor stuff gets even screwier. And if you thought the X-Men continuity was crazy, wait until you see what's going on here in Wonder Woman. But anyway, 230, absolutely classic cover. You can see that my copy I have signed here. On the side here is signed by writer, the late Marty Pasco. And up here I have it signed by the artist, the great Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. He does some of the covers on this run. Periodically they'll bring him in to do a cover, and his covers are just absolutely fantastic. He's not doing the interior art. For a long time the interior art ends up being done by Jose Delbo, and I'll show you some of his stuff. And he's workmanlike, he's solid. He's like the Sal Buscema of DC. So it's like, he's okay. He has his moments, we'll get to those later. 231, we have this cool storyline, and I say cool because it's got the Justice Society of America in it, so it's always cool to have a Justice Society thing. That technically I don't think counts as bondage. She's trapped inside a weird glass pyramid, but it is a really improbable pose that they've got her in here. This cover is by Nasser. And this one's also by Nasser, and just the grasp of anatomy, let's say, is lacking a little bit. If you look at this just a weirdly proportioned Wonder Woman figure. Again, this is part of a I think this is like a 3-part storyline with the Justice Society. So it is cool, and it involves I think it involves some, since it's in Egypt, some of the Hawkman stuff, which is, if anything's more confusing than Wonder Woman, it's Hawkman. 233, here is a great monster cover by Gray Morrow, of all people, who is fantastic, occasionally doing work from DC at this time. I think he's just finished his stint as the head of the Archie's horror line at Red Circle. So this is right around the time that ended. It's great cover there. 234. These stories aren't bad. They're just so-so. That's about as good as Wonder Woman gets for most of this entire run. Is so-so. If the story is not actively bad, then that's considered good for Wonder Woman, because some of them are really bad. Here we have 235. It's got the little blurb at the top where the contest where you could be in the Superman movie. This also has a Dr. Midnight in it. I love Dr. Midnight. You can see him here, just being tossed around by the bad guy. Big fan of Dr. Midnight. Very underrated and underused character. Just really great. 236. She's fighting a character named Armageddon, who's got this weird spiked Nazi outfit. And of course you can see Steve Trevor. You've got you've captured the formula that will save Steve Trevor's life, Amazon. Yeah, so Steve Trevor fulfilling his role as a damsel in distress. Here's one. General MacArthur must die, and MacArthur saying, "Get back, Wonder Woman. I don't need a female to fight my battles." I don't want to get political here, but General MacArthur colossally arrogant jackass, in my opinion. I've done a lot of reading about World War II, and for me, General Marshall is just one of the all-time great unsung American military heroes. I'm a huge fan of Omar Bradley. Um, but MacArthur, again, I don't want to, I shouldn't even bring it up. Let's just say some of the stuff that he did, particularly later on during the Korean War. If this was Wonder Woman of Earth 1 and she knew what the history was, maybe she would have just let this alien eat him. 238, Kung, Assassin of 1,000 Claws. So this is a you can see how subtle they are with their Japanese character's costume, where it's got the yin yang and then the rising sun. I don't know. 239. There's a Golden Age Flash appearance here, so that's really cool. The Statue of Liberty. I think they actually fight the Statue of Liberty here. It gets like animated or something. Here's an absolutely great cover. Again, my copy is signed by the artist Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I love this, where we got the wanted poster and the guy's pulling the gun out of the drawer. That's not going to work because the bracelets, but it's an awesome cover. Just really great. 241. 242, Wonder Woman's close encounter with tomorrow's gods and demons. Help me, Wonder Woman. I'm being kidnapped by a flying saucer. Of course, UFO stuff was really big in the 70s, and this is April. I don't know what year this is, but this is around when Close Encounters Third Kind came out. But that was in the zeitgeist. It was like a big thing at the time. So here we have 243, and we're about to get our new reboot. You can see here it's the Wonder Women of Earth 1 and Earth 2 clash in the 5-sided square. So this is the issue where we have the story where they interact again, but we switch back. So now we're following the Earth 1 Wonder Woman again. So the series, the TV series is switched back to the present day. So they switch the comic back to the present day. And the result is that, we just got this swinging pendulum of background and characters. In this previous run in World War II, of course, now we've got Etta Candy as one of the supporting characters in the whole Golden Age group, but now we're getting back to Earth 1. And one of the big issues that the series faces is that the Earth 1 issues up to 227 were being written by Marty Pasco, and he wrote a couple of those, some of the first ones with the Earth 2, but then I believe, and I might be getting this wrong, I think Jerry Conway might have taken over. But the point is, when they switch back, it's now Jack C. Harris is taken over as the writer, and he's stuck with what the status quo was, basically, with the series from 2 years earlier when it had left off in the Marty Pasco run. Here's 244, and basically the status quo now is that Wonder Woman is no longer like Steve Trevor's secretary working for the Air Force or whatever that was, because of course Steve Trevor is dead twice over now. But she ends up being an interpreter at the United Nations. 245. Uh, 246. So Steve Trevor is in these issues, right? But he's called Steve Howard now because he had died and then got brought back by Aphrodite. Now remember, Earth 2, Steve Trevor is still in World War II over on Earth 2. So now we're back to this simulacrum version. And so Wonder Woman sets up a fake identity for him under the name Steve Howard because he can't be Steve Trevor because the government knows Steve Trevor died. But that's going to come back to bite her. Before we get to that, 247. So we're in the 44-page era, and you see this thing here. It says, plus, beginning in this issue, Tales of the Amazons. This was, the idea was that they'd raise the price, but they'd add more content, so it would be worth it for the kids, and it would be, the higher price point would also make it more marketable for the stores that were trying to, so they'd get more shelf space. And of course, this only lasted a few issues before the DC implosion just blew everything up, and they had to cancel all that. But we do get this 248, and 248 basically this guy, this military guy who is like secretly worshiping like this demonic being, figures out that Steve Howard is actually Steve Trevor, but he knows Steve Trevor is dead. And so he's like, this is it. This is the secret of immortality that I need in order to bring back this evil, like Conan-esque demon from, the days of yore. And so he captures this new Steve Trevor and ends up draining his life force to resurrect this demon guy, the Dark Commander. And so at the end of this issue, the new Steve Trevor that Marty Patsco works so hard to bring back from the dead gets killed off just a couple issues after after they go back to Earth 1. So Jack C. Harris is like, this character should have stayed dead, so he just kills him off again, right? So now, if you're keeping track, it's Steve Trevor dies in issue 180. A new Steve Trevor is born in 225. We get the Earth 2 Steve Trevor starting in 228. He disappears, and we go back to the new Steve Trevor, but then here in 248, he dies. But don't worry, later in this video, there's going to be yet another Steve Trevor that's going to come into play to make things really confusing. In the meantime, though, we get this brief period where, blissfully, there's no Steve Trevor, and Jack C. Harris is doing everything he can to make the series fresh and new and interesting. This one here, 249, it's got Hawkgirl, which is a natural team-up, and I think it's a great idea. 250 and 251, All Hail Orana. Victor of the Tournament, All Hail the New Wonder Woman. This is a really important story. 240, 241 is a story where they hold the contest again to see who should be Wonder Woman. Of course, that's a big part of Diana's origin, is she secretly enters this contest to see who will go to Man's World. And Diana wins it and becomes Wonder Woman. Well, they hold the contest again, but this time Diana doesn't win. She loses, and this other person from Paradise Island becomes the new Wonder Woman. And this is a really excellent story, and now it's done in 2 parts, but we're going to see this type of story come up many times in the 80s. This is in the late 70s here, because the whole point of the story is just like stuff with like, when Rhodey takes over as Iron Man, or when Captain America, is replaced by the government, or when Thor is replaced by Eric Masterson, or stuff like the Azrael or the 4 Supermen. The stories all have the same point, which is that it's not about the powers or the costumes, it's about the person. It's about Tony Stark, it's about Steve Rogers. There's something about them as a person that makes them heroic, that makes them the real hero. It's not all the other stuff. And what happens in this storyline is this new Wonder Woman is much more sort of militant. She's less about teaching Man's World love, and more about more authoritarian. She's not really a superhero. I think there's a thing in one of these issues where she decides not to bother saving people because just screw them. And what ends up happening is, as a result, everything gets completely screwed up. And in this issue, she basically realizes the error of her ways. She dies trying to save the day after messing something up. And she realizes that Diana needs to be the real Wonder Woman. So when she dies, the mantle goes back to Wonder Woman. So it not only does it act as a precursor for a lot of other storylines, it's basically This exact story we see in the 90s in Wonder Woman, um, where with the Artemis storyline that runs from around, I don't know exactly when, but like issue 70 to 100, where there's Artemis becomes the new Wonder Woman and Diana gets like this black leather 90s outfit because she's no longer Wonder Woman. And then in issue 100 the same thing dies, where the same thing happens. Artemis dies and Diana takes over the Wonder Woman mantle again. Now that takes like years to play out. This is just a two-parter. It's the exact same storyline though. And so all of that is basically based on this. This is one of the high points of the Bronze Age Wonder Woman run. This two-parter is really good. Here we are at 252. Now, we'll see. You see Wonder Woman's in space here. So Jack C. Harris is trying to do something different with Wonder Woman, and so what he does is he actually has her leave her UN gig, which I think was a holdover from Marty Pasco. And so what she does is she goes to Houston and she becomes an astronaut. So there's this brief period here where Diana is an astronaut working for NASA. And there's some interesting stories here. Here's a really great Jose Delbo cover. It's probably his best and his best known. You can barely see it here, but my copy is autographed by Jose Delbo, and 253. So this says, incredible, the battle with the body snatcher from space. So we get a lot of space stuff here because she's working at NASA, and it's a really interesting sort of twist. Again, I feel like this might have inspired Bill Messner-Loebs, because when he took over Wonder Woman from George Perez, the first thing he did was have Diana go to space, and then he did the Artemis storyline. So I feel like he was kind of reading these Jack C. Harris stories. I always find it interesting when you can sort of tell that. Like, for instance, Tom DeFalco's run on Thor around issue like from 400 to like 420 is very clear that he had just done a deep read of Jerry Conway's run from like 200 to 220, and a lot of his stories are based on those issues. Same thing here. Okay, so 254. Here's another issue of Wonder Woman fighting Angleman. So we've seen Angleman 2 or 3 times already, just in this batch. And it's sort of an indictment of how bad her rogues gallery is, that Angleman is actually one of her best villains. The stories with Angleman are interesting. He's got this triangle that has some sort of dimensional properties that can like shift geometry in weird ways, and it makes it very difficult for Diana to bring her powers to bear in their confrontation. She has to outthink him. So he's a really good villain. So 255. I think this is actually back at the UN. 256. There's a new Royal Flush Gang. I love the Royal Flush Gang, so it's great. There's been an ongoing storyline in the NASA parts where there's this new Royal Flush Gang, and then, spoiler alert, it turns out that the guy that was her new love interest, one of the other like astronauts, is actually the villain in the Royal Flush Gang. So he had been set up to be like a replacement for Steve Trevor, but that was all a trick from Jack C. Harris. So these are some of the better issues of Wonder Woman. They're not great, but they're solid reads, and they have a something, like he's trying something. 257, here's another cool cover where she's being eaten by a giant dinosaur. So we got a couple of these now. Do love yellow covers. 258, it's a test pilot cover. There's a lot of covers with Wonder Woman interacting with planes because of the Air Force thing, so it's always cool. 259, we see Hercules. You may remember that Hercules was involved in the storyline that brought back Steve Trevor around 225. I think that Hercules had just had his own series. They do get into it, if I remember, a little bit here. Of course, in the George Perez run, Hercules is a very important figure because one of his trials historically was defeating the Amazons. And so George Perez did a whole thing about that, which was really tastefully and excellently done. There's a little bit about that here because he's a natural enemy for Wonder Woman based on his history with Wonder Woman's mother, and that actually comes up again in Justice League of America versus the Avengers, the JLA Avengers crossover with Kurt Busiek. There's a part where Hercules boasts about defeating Hippolyta, and Wonder Woman is like, okay, and then she proceeds to just beat the absolute hell out of Marvel's Hercules, so that was great. 260. She's being hauled off to jail. Jose Delbo. 261. $262. Wonder Woman declares war on the street warriors. You call yourselves warriors. You're nothing but vermin. I think this was right around the time when the movie Warriors about the different gangs fighting each other came out. So I'm pretty sure this was inspired by that. 263. Even with all her powers, Wonder Woman is no match for the Gaucho, a real man. So I think they're trying to do some stuff here with like the sort of macho movement of the 70s. So thematically, I guess, but this character is not working at all for me. He's sort of a third-rate Terror Man, and I like Terror Man. I'm a Terror Man defender. This guy is kind of crappy. 264, we have the second part of the fight with Gaucho, where again it's almost the same coverage from a different angle. 265, this promises a Wonder Girl solo adventure. I'm not sure how many books that sold. 266, again we got a Wonder Girl backup story. 267, here's a cool, it's a two-part story featuring Animal Man. This might be his first appearance after his brief run in the 60s in Strange Adventures. He appeared in a handful of issues of Strange Adventures, and then he sort of vanished, but he had a couple appearances here and there. I'm sure it was for trademark reasons. But one of them comes up here. It's a storyline that involves superpowered poachers or something. But it's a two-part with Animal Man. And these briefly got a little bit of heat in the late 80s when Animal Man got his own series and Grant Morrison was doing Animal Man, and Animal Man was popular for a brief period of time. And since he had so few appearances before then, some of his appearances were, became slightly valuable. Okay, you ready for this? Here we go. 269. It's time for another reboot. Yes, so let's do the reboot counter. 178, 204, 212, 228, 244, and now 269. Great cover, first of all. There's the UN. She quits. She's throwing her stuff away. There's actually a series of really excellent covers here. Here she is. You see she's not wearing the costume anymore. And then 271, and I'm going to explain this all when I get to, I guess I'll just do it here. You'll see, once again, they've had the contest, the competition, and she has won. Here she's saying she doesn't want it. And then we also see over here Huntress. I've got a lot to talk about here. Basically what happens in this storyline is Wonder Woman becomes disillusioned with man's world, quits man's world. You know, Steve Trevor has once again died, like all this crap, and it's just everyone's a jerk. Despite her best efforts, it's all war and doom and gloom. It's the 1970s, everything's gone straight to hell. So she goes back to Paradise Island and she unburdens her soul to her mother about how horrible everything is and how nothing she's done has made any difference. And Hippolyta's like, she always thought it was a bad idea for her to even try. And so what Hippolyta does is she uses one of their super science things to mind wipe Wonder Woman so she doesn't remember any of it. So she doesn't remember ever even leaving Paradise Island. So she basically just erases from Wonder Woman's memory, from Diana's memory, everything that happened since Wonder Woman #1 in 1941, from All Star #8 when she first appeared. None of that ever happened. She doesn't remember anything. And so she's back on Paradise Island. That's what we have her here, where she's not wearing a costume. There's things going on. And then we also get her here. And what ends up happening, as you can tell, she's having the contest with it and the whole thing, right? First of all, nice nod here. The armor she's wearing seems to be the same outfit that Mike Stokowski designed for her in issue, I think it's 183 and 184, where she leads the army of Themyscira in a battle against Ares' army, which is a great, great story. So that's cool that they brought that back. So as you can see here, what ends up happening is that Diana is basically fated, whether it's by the gods or something, to be Wonder Woman. And so the same series of events happens that leads her to become Wonder Woman. So this is basically a retelling of her origin, but now it's set in the present day DC universe. And it all happens again, including, can you guess where I'm going with this? There's a new Steve Trevor. And what happens is a portal in space opens and Steve Trevor from another dimension flies through this thing and his plane crashes and she saves him. So it's exactly the way that she met Steve Trevor originally, where his plane crashed and she dove into the ocean to save him. But because this is all fated, now that Steve Trevor's dead and the Steve Trevor double is dead and the original Steve Trevor is still on Earth too, a portal to yet another alternate Earth, not Earth 2, but a new one opens, and that world Steve Trevor flies through and crashes the plane and she rescues him. So we're basically back to the exact status quo from the first issues of Wonder Woman back in the 1940s, except it's now set in the current DC universe. So there's a new Steve Trevor. Diana's done the contest, and in the next issue, 272, she travels to man's world. Really great cover. It's Dave Cockrum this time around. Excellent, excellent cover. So this 4-part story basically resets everything. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. It might have been Len Wein. I don't really even feel like opening the comic to look. It was either, I always get Len Wein confused with Marv Wolfman, but I think it's Len Wein on these. But the point is, they reset everything to that original continuity and just start everything over. Now, you can imagine there's some issues with this that they don't really get into very much here, where, like, everyone that knows about Wonder Woman, she doesn't remember them, but they know her. I don't remember how they handled that. So let's rewind to this issue again, because I also want to mention this issue starts a new Huntress solo series. Huntress had first appeared just a little bit before this in Justice Society. All-Star 69 came out the same time as DC Superstar 17. They came out the same day. And so Huntress, of course, is on Earth 2, just to make things more confusing. What I find weird is that a lot of people, here's the next issue, Huntress is fighting Solomon Grundy, which seems like a real mismatch. Meanwhile, here's Wonder Woman fighting Angleman again, so this is exciting, because I actually like Angleman, because all of her other villains are so bad. I've talked to a number of people online who were basically like, oh, Wonder Woman was terrible at the time, but they were buying the book just for Huntress. And I find that boggling, because the Huntress series continues almost for the rest of this run. It runs for like 40 issues. And the initial run here, these initial stories are pretty good, but then Joey Cavallari takes over as writer a little bit later. And the Huntress series is absolute flaming garbage. It's so bad. Like, writing is so bad. I like the character, but they squander everything after about the first 10 issues or so. They squander everything. And as we'll see later on, Wonder Woman actually gets pretty good towards the end. And so I just, it's weird just talking to all these people that are like, oh yeah, I was buying it for the Huntress, but the main stories were terrible. And I'm like, it's kind of the opposite. The Wonder Woman stories are actually getting better, and the Huntress stories get worse very quickly. But here's cool. Here's cool in Power Girl teaming up with Huntress. That's sort of a classic pairing. And I think there's a new Cheetah in this issue as well. It's 274. Yep, I was right. 275. There's Wonder Woman fighting Cheetah. It's nice to have Cheetah back. We only saw her that one time on Earth 2. So it's nice to have Cheetah back because Wonder Woman desperately needs good villains. And then finally, we're going to end this video with this three-parter. 276, beginning in this issue. We still have the Power Girl Huntress storyline, but beginning in this issue, it's a three-part storyline featuring Cobra, which ties up the loose ends from the Cobra, the series. The DC had this short-lived series called Cobra, which is about two brothers, where one is heading this secret villain organization called Cobra, and the other is actually like fighting against him. And that just sort of like ended on a cliffhanger. Well, they finally end that storyline in this issue, 278. So if you ever read those issues of Cobra and wondered what the hell happened, these 3 issues of Wonder Woman actually give you the answer and finally finish that storyline. So that's it for this time. 51 issues of Wonder Woman down, and then next time we're going to start with issue 279, and we're going to go to the end, 329, another 51 issues. And don't worry, there's still one more soft reboot to come. It's not quite as big a reboot as some of these, but it's another reboot. We get a new costume, we get a new status quo, we get new supporting characters, we get a new creative team that wants to go in a new direction. And so this period here, where they've just relaunched everything, actually only lasts for 20 issues before the next one. So I've got, and there's plenty more stuff with Steve Trevor to come as well, because now we've got this new Steve Trevor from another dimension, and things get wacky. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed making this video a little bit more than I actually enjoyed reading these stories, because many of them are not very good. Again, the best of these are just okay. The 250, 251 is definitely the best. And this new era here with the relaunch in 269, those stories are pretty good. They're better than what came before. They're still not great, but they're better. They're better. They're working on it. So that's it for this time. Again, at some point in the near future, I'll wrap up this look at the full Bronze Age Wonder Woman. If people are really liking this stuff, I can then continue with the Copper Age, because I do have the full George Perez run, which is issues 1 to 62. So we could talk about that if you want a 4th video in this series. But for now, thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.